Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I'm your host tonight. My name is Nick Walsh. I'm here with my good friend Vinny Gonzalez. Vinny, what's going on, dude? We're here to talk about your team tonight.
Yes, we're going to tackle the AFC North with my personal favorite, the Bengals. So that's always depressing and very exciting for me. I can't wait to get into it because it's a crazy division. It's pretty close, and the Browns are, looking pretty good. So I'm very eager to talk about everything that's going on in this division because I love it.
Yeah. This is gonna be pretty fun. You're right. It is a very close division. A couple teams are. I mean, there's a lot of changes, I guess, which we've been kind of emphasizing all the way through. But tonight, or in this episode, rather, we are going to discuss the Bengals and the Steelers. And then in part two of the AFC North, we're gonna hit you with the Browns and the Ravens. So both episodes should be pretty solid. I'm gonna warn you or let you know, I guess, because I'm not sure exactly when these are coming out. We're recording them on the 24th. So keep that in mind, I guess, in case we say anything that sounds stupid in a couple of days. I know we're also getting the NFC East done this week, so I don't know the exact order that these will be released in. But again, we're recording this on July 24th, and we're ready to rock. But Vinny, before we do get into that, we do have to give you guys a special message courtesy of Auction Draft. Auction Draft is the best site for running your fantasy football auction league in 2018, and you can sign up now and get on the list for launch by going to letstalkfantasyfootball.com/auction draft. The promo code LTFF when you go to their website is going to get you 50% off your league. So make sure to enter that in. That is all capitals, LTFF. Definitely check that out, guys. We'll be getting an auction draft going within the next couple of weeks here, probably as we wrap up division previews. So keep an eye out for that as well. We also got to mention that we're in the running for a podcast award, courtesy of podcastawards.com. So go to podcastawards.com. You can register for free, and you can vote for us in the sports category. Vinny, let's get right the fuck into the Bengals here. I am ready to rock. So I guess overall, let's talk about just some of the big picture changes. So it's year two for the Bengals under Bill Lazor. I guess year 1.5, right? Under Bill Lazor, given that they fired Ken Zampese as their offensive coordinator halfway through the year. So talk to me a little bit about whether you think the offense is going to change this year, or whether you think they're going to stick to that sort of conservative Marvin Lewis style offense.
Well, they pretty much got a full year under Lazor because remember the Bengals' awful 0-2 start, getting like shut out 2 games in a row, and then they brought in Lazor against the Packers for week 3, and then he threw the ball to AJ Green like 20 plus times, and I'm like, yeah, this will work. So it was pretty much a full year, and I liked what I saw for the most part. They tried to get Mixon involved. Gio was doing his thing. Hill was irrelevant, so it's kind of, I think, going to be more of the same of what we saw, just with more stability for the offensive line. They bring in Billy Price. They drafted the center out of Ohio State in the first round. So that is fantastic for them. And they also traded for Cordy Glenn from the Bills, which shores up the left tackle spot. And I was so excited about that in the offseason. It was like the saddest moment of my life. The Bengals needed a line change so bad, and it was just such a good move in the offseason, which the Bengals do not do. So I'm so happy about that. So the line should be a little bit, yeah, the line should be a little better, more stable, because they were god awful last year. But as bad as they were, they did finish 7-9, and were still kind of relevant in the playoff hunt in the terrible AFC, which was not saying a lot, but to be in the playoff race like still into December was pretty amazing for how they looked. So they're kind of always hanging around, but I seem to overestimate them most years. So there's always that.
Yeah, it's also worth noting on the offensive line, they brought in Frank Pollock, who was the Cowboys offensive line coach the past 2 years. Their previous offensive line coach, I forget the guy's name, but he had been there like 23 seasons or some shit like that. So a little bit of fresh blood there with the offensive line coaching staff. Like you said, they brought in those 2 offensive linemen. Last year, I was like really high on the Bengals offense. And like kind of had this creeping suspicion that if the offensive line was bad, it was going to cause all my predictions to be wrong, and they were bad and all my predictions were wrong. So I'm kind of pretty high on them this year because I think the offensive line is going to be better. Let's get right into Andy Dalton, though, at the quarterback position. He's going undrafted. Do you think that's correct?
Yes. I think if anything happens and the Bengals start to do well and Andy Dalton starts to, every time they've had a solid line, he's always been a solid player. And I think he gets a lot of shit that he doesn't deserve because I think Dalton's a great quarterback. But when the line is shored up, he is a more than capable quarterback and should be a shoe-in probably for 4,000 yards, but I would not draft him. And I think it's something that, like, prove it to me and then could be that pickup that he was for most people in 2015 when he had that great year. So I think it'll be something like that. Definitely don't draft him right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's in the streamer conversation, like pretty much all the quarterbacks from, like, rank 13 to basically all the other ones in the league. It is interesting that they play the Colts week 1, and we know the Colts are a terrible team with a terrible defense. But I mean, maybe that's probably not, like, unless, I mean, if you're in a 2 quarterback league, I think you can start in week 1, like, no problem, or like a super flex league. Just because it's a great matchup week 1. But if you're in a regular league, don't worry about drafting him. Keep an eye out for him on those good matchups if he does play well.
Another wild thing about that is they play the last preseason game is Bengals or Colts at Bengals, and then they go play the Colts week 1.
That's really weird.
It's the weirdest thing
I've seen. Like a scheduling fuck up.
Yes, I think it was 100%. They just kind of left it.
Yeah, they were like, yeah, we already made the rest of it, I guess.
Leave it.
Yeah, so that's Dalton. Let's move on to the running back position, where there's a bit of intrigue, and we've got Joe Mixon being drafted high again after a disappointing overall year, but a pretty good second half of the year last year. So Mixon going off the board, first pick in the 3rd round. That's running back 14. Again, all our ADPs tonight are from Fantasy Football Calculators, 12-team PPR ADP. Gio Bernard is also still there. He is going off the board, 7th pick in the 11th round. That's running back 49. And then it's worth noting that they drafted a running back, Mark Walton, out of Miami in the 4th round, which is pretty high for a running back when you have Mixon and Bernard there. And Walton kind of profiles as a scat back, a Geo type back as well behind there. So that's a little bit interesting, but nothing too much to worry about, I don't think. What are your opinions on Mixon and Geo? And then do you have any thoughts on Walton as well?
You took the words right out of my mouth for Mark Walton. I just thought that was kind of like a Geo insurance, just because Geo missed some time with the ACL 2 years ago, and kind of got back to form last year. So I think that's just so they have that change of pace back in case anything were to happen to Geo. So I don't think anyone has to worry about his workload getting involved or cutting into Mixon or Geo's workload for that matter. I think Geo's going too high. It's kind of where he went as a rookie. Which was
Mixon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Last year, he was kind of going in like the same zone, and he underperformed getting taken there. And I think he'll probably have the same sort of opportunities here because the 1-2 punch is probably going to be in effect again with Gio and Mixon sharing time, and it could probably get a little frustrating. I don't think he's going to be a lead back like people expect him to be, but he's multi-talented. He can catch out of the backfield and all that. It's just I don't know if his ceiling is going to be realized this season or anything like that. I think Gio is very talented and the Bengals love to use him, and it's just going to be frustrating for fantasy purposes. But that's kind of why I'm liking Gio super late. I think you just take Gio and he could be a bye-week flex guy for you probably for the entire year. One of the more frustrating things to do as well, but going that late, it's something cool, especially in the running back position. But for Mixon, I don't think I'll be owning him. It just seems too high. I don't know. How are you feeling about Mixon?
So I think the question here really comes down to what this split is going to be, because I agree with you that Mixon, I think, was productive in the pass game last year, and I think he can be used in the pass game. I think if they wanted him to be a guy who gets 70-80% of the running back touches, like, he totally could be. But do you think this is a 50-50 split? Do you think it's 60-40? Is it like 66-33? Like, I don't know, because I think if we're looking at like somewhere around like 66-33 or like 65% of these running back touches are going to Mixon, I think he's worth it at that price, but I don't know if that's really the case or whether it's closer to 50-50.
I would say 60-40. So
Okay.
Mixon will start, get his thing going, and he'll see his opportunities. But what's strange about the Bengals is they use Gio in the red zone an awful lot, and I think that has a lot to do with how they scheme games. And it's weird because they run counters and draws and screens with Gio down there, so it could take away scoring opportunities for Mixon. Like, he's not going to be the goal line back, and they don't really have one, so they might be using Gio down there as a gadget kind of deal. But not to say that Mixon won't get his opportunities. It's just something that you can't bank on. So that's why I think taking him in the turn of the second is pretty high there.
Yeah, I think the casual perception of this backfield is that Mixon is going to get early down work and goal line carries, and Gio is going to be the third down back and get passing down stuff. But you're right. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it's probably more of they'll both get a little bit of goal line work. They'll both get some passing down work. They'll both get some runs in between the tackles. It's just a matter of what that split is. I mean, if you look at the other running backs going around that area, which I'm just pulling up right now, if you'll give me one moment, just so we can really put this into perspective. So Mixon
is almost all dried up, basically. It's like Mixon's probably the last guy you could be a little comfortable with, but it's still one of the bigger risks you can take, like in the earlier rounds, for sure.
Yeah, right after Jerick McKinnon, right before Jordan Howard, LaShawn McCoy, Darius Geist, Derrick Henry, Alex Collins. So yeah, it's those names I mentioned afterwards, all of those definitely have their own concerns. I think that's probably, and you and I have talked about this, I think that's probably an area where I'm going to be looking receiver a little bit. So I may not end up with too much Mixon either, but I don't know that he's mispriced based on the guys that are in front of him and behind him.
Yeah, this actually could be a result of just running backs being pretty shallow. And so I think that's actually a good call, Walsh, because but like the thing for me is when you look at it, if you're in picks, let's say 1 through 5, there's a realistic expectation that you could possibly have two wide receivers. Let's say if you're at the 5th pick, you take like Antonio Brown. Let's say Julio slides to you, and Mixon could potentially slide to you a little bit. You can be looking at that, and I just don't feel super comfortable with Mixon as like your number 1 running back, and that's what I feel like some people are doing.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. It's a difficult decision for sure, but it is one where I'm not. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It feels high, but it's hard for me to really argue with him at the same time. So I don't know. I guess we'll kind of leave Mixon at that. I agree with you that I like Gio where he is as sort of a guy who you can fill in on bye weeks, as a flex, as an RB2. And also a guy who, if Mixon does get an injury, you're looking at a guy who now, instead of getting maybe 40% of the work, he's probably the guy getting 60% of the work. And that puts Gio in a great position to perform above your, where you're drafting him and potentially be an every week starter at that point. Do you have anything else on the running backs?
No, I think we kind of got that. We're scared, but they're both in pretty good positions to have a good workload, but it's going to be, eating at each other. So it's a little tough.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to the wide receivers. The only one being drafted right now is AJ Green, and AJ Green, like a lot of other receivers, honestly, is going really at the lowest that you're able to get him in years. He is currently going off the board as the 8th pick in the 2nd round. That's wide receiver 8. And just for perspective, this is a guy who has been a top 12 wideout in fantasy points per game in all 7 seasons of his career. So given that information, do you like AJ where he's going? Do you think he deserves to go higher, lower? What's your opinion there?
I think he's priced appropriately, although, I'd like to like him and Julio we talked about it when we did the NFC South, just kind of disrespected. But looking at the guys around him, I think he might be, or he probably is priced appropriately. Like the guys going before him are Julio, Thomas, Allen, and Devontae Adams, and then AJ Green right after. So I think unless you view AJ Green higher than any of those guys, which it's kind of a tough call because they're like all the elite guys going in the 2nd round, which is wild. And I think you could see a variation of any order of those guys in the second round, kind of like you'll see that in the running backs in the first round. It's very preference based, and him going this late is a gift, basically.
Yeah, you're ending up with a guy who, is as close as a guarantee as you can get to be a wide receiver one for you, barring injury. He's going to eat up targets in this offense. He's going to get looks in the red zone. He's going to get looks downfield. We know what AJ Green is. And I think the offensive line potentially being a little bit better. I think the guys around AJ Green, the other wide receivers, potentially being a little bit better. I think all of that bodes well for him. Last year, he was an inefficient target monster, sort of. And I expect him to be much more efficient this year. Just to illustrate that a little bit better, he had 143 targets, but he had a career worst catch rate in 2017. It was 52.4%. His career average is 58.5%. And that's really just because there was nothing else on this Bengals offense that was really working. There was no one else in the passing game to really go to. So with a couple other options that we will talk about, potentially, improving and the offensive line improving, I like AJ Green to increase his efficiency from last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Hit the nail on the head. Only had 75 catches, like you said, and that should just go up or, be even better. It's going to be fine, I think. And if John Ross is anything like we expect him to be when he was drafted, that just opens up the entire offense. And then it's like there's a lot of pieces that need to fall in together. You need a healthy John Ross. You need a healthy Tyler Eifert. And you need Brandon LaFell to get phased out and Tyler Boyd to become sort of a solid number two. So, which I think will happen. I think Tyler Boyd will see the field more. And I think we're going to start getting into more of 3 wide receiver sets with AJ Boyd and Ross. And that's just freaky to me. I like that a lot. And then you could possibly have Tyler Eifert running around out there, who all the ambiguous talk out of camp is he's looking wonderful and feeling great. So there's nothing that could possibly go wrong with that at all. And yeah, I expect them to be much better, like you said.
Let's go back to those wide receivers real quick. So the 3 of them, LaFell, Boyd, and Ross, none of them are getting drafted. Do you kind of made your thoughts clear that you want LaFell to be phased out for Ross to really get on the field, be that deep threat, the guy who opens up the lid on the offense, and then Boyd to kind of play in the slot. I'm kind of okay with taking a flyer on John Ross at the end of drafts. He's basically, he is free. He's being undrafted. So like, if you're going to say your last position player, or even like a 12th or 13th round, you want to take a flyer on John Ross. Like, I think that's completely fine. What do you think about that?
No, that's a great call. And I think in like the first 3 to 5 weeks, 5 being the extreme, I think we'll know pretty quickly if John Ross is going to be a big part or focal point of the offense or not. He could easily be like Tavon Austin ineffective, as what we saw last year in his like very, very, very small sample size. But if he's healthy and a go, that could be a complete steal, especially for not paying anything for him. So I'm with you on that. It's just, I guess it depends how your draft shakes out. And if you want to take him as the last pick, that's totally fine.
Yeah, cool. You talked about Eifert, how the reports are that he's feeling great and whatever else. There was a report today that he's not expected to start camp with them or to be full go for camp with them, and they don't really have a definite timeline. So we're kind of back to where we were with Tyler Eifert, where it's unclear when he's going to play. He's missed more games than he's played in during his career, and the team is being pretty vague about it. He's currently still being drafted, or at least when I made these notes, he was, as tight end 14, the 5th pick in the 13th round. Is he worth drafting for you, or do we just need to wait for more information?
So this draft, like this ADP, I don't think is going to stick like whatsoever, especially once the Bengals start camp and the preseason starts as well, because you're going to have way more insight to what Eifert's doing. Hopefully, I hope they stop being so ambiguous with this, but where he's going right now, I have zero problem with that. I hate tight end as it is. So why wouldn't you take a guy who can be a top 5 tight end potentially if he has a healthy season going in the mid 13th? That's totally fine with me.
Okay. And then say we know Tyler Eifert is out, at least to start the season. Does Tyler Kroft become an intriguing guy for you? We mentioned we think the offense is going to open up a little bit if John Ross can take the lid off the offense, take the attention of some of those safeties. Does that make Tyler Kroft a little bit interesting? And we know he can work in the red zone too. He had 12 red zone targets last year that got turned into 7 touchdowns. So is he an intriguing guy in the late rounds for you, or maybe even as a streamer? Where does he fit there?
So the offense was so poor last year. I think the emergence of Tyler Kroft might have been a fluke. They also rotated in Ryan Hewitt, who is like a fullback kind of tight end replacement guy that they use down at the goal line as well. So yeah, I think if Eifert's out for like a long period of time again, Kroft is certainly streamable. I don't know about draftable or any kind of breakout season, but he's certainly a guy that's there.
Sometimes that's all you really need at tight end.
That's what I was going to say. He did that last year, and he was the guy that was there. And I think potentially he could be a stream-worthy dude. But I don't have lofty expectations for Tyler Kroft at all.
Slogan for Tyler Kroft is Tyler Kroft. That guy's there.
Yeah. 6 yards, 1 catch, touchdown. Perfect tight end fantasy day.
Yeah. Sweet. Yeah, so that's the Bengals. I don't think there's really too much else on them. I think I'm going to bet they're over for the second year in a row. Last year, I actually bet them like long odds to win the Super Bowl, and then like they came out to that horrendous start. I was just like, oh no,
my money is gone.
Yeah,
dude, do you want to know their Super Bowl odds now?
What are they?
Dude, they are the worst in the league currently.
Are they really?
Dude, I was embarrassed because I went to the Monmouth track and now they have sports betting live. And I was like, sweet, what are the Bengals? I'll put some money on that. And it was 125-1. They are the worst
I'd put
team.
$10 on that. Who the fuck cares?
Yeah, I'm going to put 100 on it just so I can win just so I can win 12K when they win the Super Bowl.
I like that, dude. It's honestly like I think they underperformed a lot because of injuries in the offensive line last year. Fucking Joe Flacco won a Super Bowl. Like,
I know. It's ridiculous. And also I'm going to bet they're over on their games too. It's 6.5.
Oh, that's an easy over for me.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like I'll probably put 100 on that one. I'm more confident in that. But
yeah. Just seeing the Browns with better odds, I was like, well, shit is changing.
Yeah, Jesus. Well, that's probably just trying to take advantage of the trend, a trendy public pick or a sexy public pick. But anyway, we'll get off the betting markets for right now, and we'll take a quick break. We'll hear from Auction Draft, and we'll be right back with the Steelers. All right, guys, that was Auction Draft. Again, make sure you're checking them out. Use that promo code LTFF. Vinny, let's get right into the Steelers and start, I guess, with Ben Roethlisberger at quarterback. Currently quarterback 14. That is the 11th pick in the 10th round. I think he's priced appropriately. I don't know. I don't have too much else to say on Roethlisberger, really.
I'm with you. It was kind of the same last year, or I think people overdrafted him last year. I think it might have overcorrected itself too much. I don't know. QB 14 seems low, but we wouldn't go higher. I don't think so. Also with Todd Haley leaving, I'm a little concerned. I don't know if the pieces around him will be enough. And, Ben's always been good, but I don't know how super efficient. Like besides the 5-pick game last year, Ben Roethlisberger was pretty good for you, especially in the later half.
Yeah. No, we know he's good. We know he can just and the Steelers in general will just have these dud games or it's always seems to be in what is on paper the best matchup of the year. They'll come out, Ben will throw 4 picks and they'll put up 7 points during the game or something like that. But in general, he's at a good price. He's not consistent game to game. We know that, but he's also one of the few quarterbacks who, if any given week he puts up 40 fantasy points, you'll be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. He's got a way higher ceiling than a lot of the quarterbacks that go in front of him, which is always something to keep in mind. Moving on to running back, we've got obviously Le'Veon Bell, 3rd pick in the 1st round right now, running back 2. He's not likely to come to camp, but he will likely report for the first game. I don't know. What do you think about him? Is he running back 1, 2, or 3 for you? Because I don't think he really goes past that for anyone.
No, he's still one off the board for me. I truly believe Le'Veon Bell is the best fantasy player that you can possibly grab early. It just sucks at the contract situation. Or I guess it could be good for you if you draft, after the first pick, because they might not want to take him there, especially if he's threatening to miss time. And it's a little sketchy now because Todd Gurley got that huge deal today, which solidifies the running back market. And now it's too late to give Bell a deal. So obviously he didn't get his deal. He's not going to have one. So hopefully he just sucks it up and plays this year. It's just, how hard is this guy going to go if he needs to save his body for contract negotiations next year or what? But I still think he's number 1 off the board talent wise, and you cannot pass him up.
Okay, that's fair. For me, I think he's number 2 behind Gurley, but you're splitting hairs. I mentioned this on the last set of podcasts that we did, that my ideal strategy is get the 3rd pick and take who's left out of him, Le'Veon and David, or him, Gurley and David Johnson. So I mean, like, he's clearly an elite player. I really feel bad for him on a personal level too.
I do. Yeah.
With the contract thing, it's like, if I were him, like, they've given this guy 350 touches plus a year for the past couple of years. It's like, pay this motherfucker. He knows running back careers aren't that long. He needs to cash in while he's still healthy, because like in a couple of years, no one's going to give him any guaranteed money, and Pittsburgh's just not doing it. It's really, I mean, I get it, but like, pay the guy. He deserves it. He's so good.
Yeah. On the personal level, I'm like, that dude deserves it more than anyone in the league. And then the Bengal fan is just like, get him out of the division now.
Yeah. For in terms of fantasy perspective, it's worth noting he did have a slow start week 1 last year after holding out. But he's such a huge part of that offense that I don't think it matters that much. And any running back who's a lock for 100 targets at Le'Veon Bell's talent level, it's just, insane. So behind him, we've got a trio of James Conner, Fitzgerald Toussaint, and Stephen Ridley. Conner was the guy who got hyped last year, but Toussaint was really the backup when it came down to it. Though Conner has reportedly impressed in training camp. I don't know. None of them are getting drafted. If Bell misses time, obviously some sort of combination of them will have fantasy value. My guess would be Conner would be the most valuable, and then Toussaint would be the next. And, those two would have some sort of split in carries and touches. But do you have any interest in any of them?
No, definitely not. Unless Bell is like, I'm out for the year, I'm not playing, then they become more interesting. But still, Le'Veon Bell leaves, you need 2 to 3 guys to replace his productivity. So I'm going to stay away from that.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's move on to wide receiver. We've got Antonio Brown, 5th pick in the 1st round. That's wide receiver 1. You and I and Don had all kind of mentioned how we think DeAndre Hopkins might be our number 1 receiver this year, but you really can't go wrong, I think, with either of them. Brown had 163 targets in only 14 games last year. In this offense, which is generally pretty efficient, he's clearly wide receiver 1 or 2 in the league.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better.
Do you have any thoughts in taking him over those 3 running backs and then Zeke, who's going 4th off the board right now? Or are you pretty set on him at 5?
With the way that wide receiver is so rich in the 2nd round, I have no problem passing up AB for any of those 4 guys.
That's sort of how I'm looking at it too. Running back at the top of the draft, you can get these guys who are true bell cows. Whereas, you're not going to get the exact production that Antonio Brown gives you, but AJ Green going 7 wide receivers later and a full, round and a quarter later, kind of replicates that production a decent amount. Whereas, at that same point, you're looking at Joe Mixon or Jerick McKinnon as your guys who you're trying to replicate your Le'Veon Bell production. So, I'm right there with you. I think it's about positional scarcity, and I think you can't really pass up those bell cow running backs at that point. So Juju Smith-Schuster, he is the number 2 wide receiver on this team after they traded Martavis Bryant to the Raiders. Juju was great last year. He's currently going the 6th pick in the 4th round, wide receiver 19. Do you like him there? And then what do you project for him this year?
Dude, I have a hard time reading what he's going to do. Obviously, Martavis leaves, but he wasn't that involved. So I don't know why people are like pumped up on that kind of absence. Like there's not much that needs to be replaced. But I guess at some point he's getting a little bit more of a target bump. But Juju was great, highly effective, only had 58 catches, almost went over 1,000 yards. Pretty productive in the touchdown department with 7. So there's a lot to love. I think there's a lot of hype around how cool he is personality-wise. So I think he'll go way higher than he should. And I think people might be a little disappointed in what actually happens. I think he's being slightly overdrafted, but obviously in like a very elite offense, there's a lot of touchdowns to go around. There's a lot of targets to go around. And I think it's 1, 2, 3 with Bell, Brown, and Juju, because I don't think anyone else is really competing for that third role in the offense.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. I'm definitely partial a bit to Juju just because he was a huge part of me winning a championship last year. So I do think
after that Lions game just took, what do you almost have 200 yards?
Yeah, dude, just like that whole like back stretch of the season, it was like Juju, it was fucking Juju, Kamara, and Alex Collins just like carrying me. I was like, this is like the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life, but hey, it worked out. I like him though. I like him where he's going. I think towards the end of last year, he really solidified his role. Over the last 7 games of the season, he averaged 7.5 targets per game. And again, this is an efficient offense. We know he's got a role in the red zone. We know he can make big plays. If you're going to tell me Juju Smith-Schuster at the end of the year is going to average 8 targets a game, I'm going to tell you he's extremely worth that draft price. So, yeah, I think it's completely fine. Battling, I guess, for the third wide receiver role, you've got James Washington, who is a rookie out of Oklahoma State, I believe. Yeah, Oklahoma State. You've got Justin Hunter and Darius Hayward-Bay, which, like, who the fuck cares? Yeah. Out of oh yeah. No, out of those 3, obviously Washington is the intriguing one. He won the 2017 Biletnikoff Award as the best or most productive wide receiver in college football. And the Steelers have been known to be able to support 3 fantasy wide receivers, or 3 fantasy, at least borderline startable fantasy wide receivers. So if Washington wins this job, are you at all interested in drafting him, or is he just a guy who you're keeping an eye on the waiver wire?
I'll keep an eye. I'm not even going to throw a flyer out there, honestly.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean there's also, obviously the caveat is like preseason anything can happen. If he comes out, he's running with the starters and like looking insanely good, then maybe we change this opinion. But at this point, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, highly agreed. Oh, Walsh, before we move on, I want to do a little bit of a name game with Juju to see who you take otherwise. Golden Tate or Juju?
They are both right there, aren't they?
Correct.
My heart says Juju. My head says Golden Tate's probably the correct pick.
I think I'd go Tate there as well. Jarvis Landry, Juju.
Oh, Juju, no question.
Okay, interesting.
I'm low on Landry.
I guess it depends who the quarterback is, which we'll talk about in the next podcast.
Teaser, baby. You got to come back.
One more. Let's do Allen Robinson or Juju.
I think I'm going Juju there just because of the uncertainty. I think Juju is more of a sure thing, and I think Robinson has a higher ceiling.
There you have it. Walsh will not budge.
I'm 100% biased, but it is what it is. I want my championship winning, Dragon Ball Z loving wide receiver on my team. But yeah, no, you are right. I think part of it is that just like
he's so fucking cool.
He's cool. Really he's got a cool name. Like there's so
a lot of that goes into his draft stock, and it sucks, but that's what it is. And he's a good player. It's just it's factored in, which is nuts.
Yeah, totally. It is 100% factored in. All right, so let's move on to tight end, where we've got Vance McDonald going off the board, tight end 17, first pick of the 14th round. Jesse James is also still there. Are you in on Vance McDonald, who managed to get 16 targets and 10 catches in the divisional round of the playoffs? Or are you not about this?
Fucking no. Like, not at all. I'd honestly, if it came down to both of them, I'd rather have Jesse James as my tight end.
So I don't know if I agree with that. I think Jesse James might end up being on the field more than Vance McDonald. McDonald's definitely going to be like the guy who's in like these passing formations. He did have that big playoff game. Apparently Ben likes him. And with Martavis gone and, like all these other things, we don't really know who their third wide receiver is. It's possible McDonald is sort of out in the slot a decent amount of the time, where he'll be running routes, and he's got Brown and, Juju going downfield, and you've got Bell out of the backfield. Like, there are scenarios in which he's a productive tight end this year. I don't think he's the worst pick in the world there. It's the last fucking round.
Yeah, I mean, he's a free tight end in a good offense, I guess, but I just think him and Jesse James will be on the field at the same time, sharing, snaps and targets.
Jesse James touchdowns are 100% going to happen too.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Like, be frustrating.
You kind of want to punch yourself in the dick every time that happens. I just like, there are other tight ends I'd rather punch myself in the dick to than having Vance McDonald as my guy.
Yeah, that's I think that's fair. I don't hate drafting him. I also don't think there's any reason to really do it. So I guess that's about it on Vance McDonald. You mentioned you might like Jesse James a little bit more. He's going undrafted, but you wouldn't bother drafting him either, right?
No, that's I didn't mean like draft him instead. Like, in his
you heard
spot.
it here first. Go out and draft Jesse James, baby.
He's the first one in your league. Get his ADP up there.
Yeah, seriously. We are nothing if not a Jesse James podcast. No, we are everything if not a Jesse James podcast. All right, I guess that's going to do it for the Steelers. We will be back with part 2 of the AFC North again. We'll have the Browns and the Ravens, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. But yeah, Vinny, you got anything else for the people before we get out of here?
No, not really. Just a reminder to keep mocking. And as of now, training camps have started, and next Thursday will be the Hall of Fame game, and the preseason will begin
next Thursday.
Next Thursday,
as in like the fucking, what day is that? The
fucking 8th?
The second?
The fucking, let me double check. This is great.
The second. It's got
second. Yes.
All right. So August fucking 2nd, you got the fucking Hall of Fame game. No, yeah, definitely. That's wild. I didn't even realize it was that quick. But yeah, we're right back to it, guys. So once we finish up these division previews, we'll be getting you through all the draft prep that you really need. But again, keep an eye out for the second part of this podcast and all our other podcasts coming up. For Vinny, I am Walsh. Later, podcast. You want to run right into the next one, or do you need to piss, get more beers?
I'm good, baby. At this break, I will.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
I'll jump right into it then.
Let's do it.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I am your host tonight. My name is Nick Walsh, and I am once again here with the one, the only, the Vinny Gonzalez. Vinny, what's up, dude?
Thank you, the Walsh. This is it's great to be back.
The Chiefs.
In the other half of the AFC North. Oh my God, I can't even talk right now.
Yes. We are back with the AFC North. We are going to do the Browns and the Ravens with the Lamar Jackson. But first, we do need to talk about our good friends over at Auction Draft. Auction Draft is the best site for running your fantasy football auction league in 2018. And you can sign up now and get on the list for launch by going to letstalkfantasyfootball.com/auction draft. The promo code is going to be LTFF. That's all capital. I think that probably matters. Maybe it doesn't matter, but just to be safe, do it all capital, and you'll get 50% off your league. Also, we are in the running for a podcast award, courtesy of podcastawards.com. So you can go to www.podcastawards.com. You can register for free, and you can vote for us in the sports category. Please do that. That would be real cool. So with that out of the way, let's get right into the rest of the AFC North. And Vinny, we are going to start with the Cleveland Browns, who had quite the interesting offseason. This team looks nothing like it did last year, which is good. It's honestly a really interesting team. So let's talk about the quarterback situation. Obviously, Baker Mayfield was the number one pick in the NFL draft, but our old familiar friend and old favorite of LTFF, Tyrod Taylor, was also traded for. So right now, Tyrod Taylor is expected to be the starter, at least at the beginning of this season. And he's currently going off the board at quarterback 25, 10th pick of the 14th round. So more or less free there. Vinny, what are your thoughts on Ty God?
I want to love it, but I know I shouldn't. I should stay away from Tyrod. And I really can't explain why. I just think the competition that like they could possibly have throughout the season. Obviously they'll have one leading up, but I think Tyrod should be the starter. And I think if you're paying nothing for Tyrod, it's great. It's just how long could you be invested if he plays poorly early on and Baker Mayfield's going to be like breathing down his neck the entire time. But at the free price, what's not to love? We've always thought Tyrod has been an underappreciated football asset as well as a fantasy football asset. And he's always good. That rushing potential is insane. And Tyrod is a great quarterback who doesn't really turn it over and is very dynamic. So I love Tyrod a lot. Paying for free, if my draft works out that way, I won't be mad. It's just I will be a little scared.
Yeah, that's fair. He starts the season with the Steelers and then the Saints, which were two pretty decent defenses last year. So he's in streamer territory. If you're in, a 2 QB league, a super flex league, maybe that's a different story. But within a 1 QB league, he's a streamer. I don't mind him going that late at all. And we all know he can create those fantasy points on the ground. I've used Tyrod Taylor plenty of times over the past couple of years, either by drafting him, by picking him up on bye weeks, whatever the case may be. He's a very usable fantasy quarterback, and I think he's going to throw the fucking pig to Josh Gordon. But we'll save that. We'll save that for a little bit later on. Baker Mayfield, if he starts, do you think he's immediately a streaming option, or do you think we need to see a little bit from him?
I think I need to see a little bit, but like I'm sure we'll get to this when we talk about the wide receivers. A lot of shit changes if these guys switch starting roles. Like obviously the correlation of Tyrod would equal much more goodness for Josh Gordon, and then Baker Mayfield would probably be way better for Jarvis Landry with the short intermediate stuff where Tyrod will just chuck fucking bombs to Gordon. So a lot would change depending on who is the starter here.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. It's worth noting that Mayfield is pretty mobile too. So it's not like you're looking, I mean, Tyrod obviously is the better rushing quarterback, but that's what we look for when you have like these guys who are questionable passers coming in. What you need in order to really get their fantasy results up there is that mobility. And Mayfield does have a bit of that. So I think he goes right into the streamer pool if he is named the starting quarterback at some point during the season. Let's talk about their running backs. This was a weird situation. They went out, they paid Carlos Hyde, gave him top 10 running back money. And then they also drafted Nick Chubb out of Georgia with the 38th overall pick. So we've got Carlos Hyde coming in, getting paid a lot. Seems like he's going to be the starter. You still have Duke Johnson, who's a guy who has been productive catching balls out of the backfield in past years. And then you've got Nick Chubb, who has virtually no passing down skills, doesn't catch the ball, doesn't block, doesn't pass protect. But he's a very, very talented runner. And we saw that at Georgia. He was taking work even when Todd Gurley was still there. So we know this guy is a talented running back. in terms of where they're going in the draft, it's all within a round of each other. Carlos Hyde, 3rd pick of the 8th round, running back 37. Duke Johnson, 9th pick, 8th round, running back 40. Nick Chubb, 3rd pick of the 9th round, running back 42. So the question here becomes, well, 2 of them. 1, what the fuck are the Browns trying to do here? And then 2, which one of these guys is the guy to go after, if any of them?
I don't know what the fuck the Browns are doing. I thought they were fine. I thought they were fine with Carlos Hyde and Duke. And they bring in Chubb. And Duke is great. I think the one guy I would want is Duke. I don't really want a part of Carlos Hyde. I don't want part of Nick Chubb. I just want Duke Johnson. He is like the other Gio Bernard, basically. And I feel like they'll be able to implement him way easier. And I think he's the guy with the slotted role for sure. 3rd down, change of pace. And is a PPR monster, which we've seen on like those awful Browns teams. He had fucking almost 80 catches. He did. He had, no, he didn't. 74 catches. He came really close on like a bad team. So I think when they implement to like a good offense, he'll have more scoring potential. He'll probably be as equally, if not more involved. And he won't have to deal with competition with each other like Carlos Hyde and Nick Chubb. Like the ceiling can only go higher for Duke Johnson, and Carlos Hyde and Nick Chubb can only go down from where you draft them.
Okay, that's fair. I definitely have some concerns there. See, for me, I know he's going the highest, but I think Carlos Hyde is the guy that I want to own because he's going to get at least some rushing work. And then Carlos Hyde is a guy last year who also got 88 targets. He caught 59 balls. This is a guy who can be used in the pass game as well. And I think the other concern with me for Duke is does Jarvis Landry kind of, I mean, obviously they're not playing the same exact position, but those guys are operating in the same space on the field. So does the addition of Jarvis Landry and the need to get him the ball because they gave him a fuck ton of money, does that sort of limit the upside of Duke Johnson as well? Ideally, I end up with none of them. I don't really want to have to deal with this situation, but I think if I do take one of them, it'll most likely be someone falling way past their ADP or me taking Carlos Hyde at ADP.
Yeah, this is definitely a tough one. It's like you kind of want these guys. It's like the opposite of the Lions that we talked about. Like you wouldn't mind having them, but at least they're not Lions running back core bad. Like you can get some productivity out of these guys. It's just with like with Hyde and Nick Chubb, I just don't see what the. I think Nick Chubb. Am I like overestimating how involved Nick Chubb could possibly be, or is he like even going to see the field? He's going to be like basically just a goal line back. I'm having trouble reading that, and I think that's what's throwing a wrench into my brain, making me think Duke Johnson's the only one that I want.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, and it's also, again, keep an eye on it in preseason. But you're right. Does Nick Chubb come in the red zone? Like, is that a thing? Because if Carlos Hyde isn't the primary passing down back and he's not getting the goal line work, then he's fucking worthless.
That's what I'm thinking here. I just think I could see him easily phased out, even though they paid him a lot. It kind of happened even in San Fran for a little bit. They tried to do other things outside of.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't think there's really a correct answer at this point. Definitely keep an eye on it in preseason. The other thing too, Tyrod Taylor doesn't throw it well to the running backs really, or throw it well short. So, I mean, like, does that change? Does it change when Baker Mayfield comes in? Like, well, there's just so many.
Because with Tyrod and Shady was fine. You know, and I think
that's true.
Duke Johnson could kind of be that involved. I mean, if there's a game plan to get him the ball, Tyrod will do it. It's just if like what the fuck are the Browns doing was your first question, and we don't know right now. So we'll have to probably see this shake out for a bit in the preseason. You're absolutely right.
All right, let's move on from this confusing running back situation to the also kind of confusing wide receiver situation. So we have Josh Gordon currently going 4th pick in the 3rd round. That's wide receiver 11. Jarvis Landry, 8th pick in the 5th round, wide receiver 24. There's been some news about both of them. Josh Gordon is not currently yet at camp. from what both he and the team have said, this was planned. This is him getting some extra counseling as a guy who, has struggled with drug issues. He has anxiety issues. This is something that he planned on doing, supposedly, to try and keep himself cool for the season. The other news, I guess, was sort of just coach speak that came out today about Jarvis Landry, which was that they plan on using him outside in 2 receiver sets. I wouldn't read too much into that. I still think he'll be primarily in the slot, and we'll just kick out when they only have 2 wide receivers on the field. Does that Josh Gordon stuff worry you at all? Are you buying into it being a bad thing? And then I guess, dependent or independent of that, what do you think about his ADP and his value?
Man, it all harkens back to like the quarterback situation for me. It's just hard for me to pay up for Josh Gordon because you do have to pay up for him somewhat. I just think, again, kind of like the Juju thing, you're going to pay for the name as well as the talent, which is astronomical. It's just there's a lot of things factored in, like the missing training camp thing. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think that's fantastic for him. Go clear your head, get straight. It's better than, slipping up. So good for Josh Gordon. It's cool to see him take it seriously, want to get healthy and all that. And paying for him here, this is probably the best you'll be able to get Josh Gordon. And I think if you love Josh Gordon, I think you should do it. And if Tyrod is definitely going to be the mainstay starter, this is a great ADP for him.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Gordon, we know he's going to be running these deep routes. We know he can go up and get the ball. We know Tyrod loves to throw it deep. So theoretically, it all makes sense. And I've been as much of a Josh Gordon marker, Josh Gordon fan for as anyone really for years. But I think there is room to pause there and like to kind of look at the people he's going around. So after Josh Gordon, you have guys like Larry Fitzgerald. You have Stephon Diggs. You have like those 2 names right there stand out to me as just like should probably be taking those guys before Josh Gordon. I mean, Tyreek Hill, I know he's sort of like a polarizing player. Amari Cooper, also polarizing player, but those 2 in particular, Fitzgerald and Diggs, like I don't know that I can pull the trigger on Josh Gordon until those 2 are off the board.
So I would definitely take Diggs over Gordon, but that's just because I love Diggs and I love, Kirk coming to the Vikings, but I would definitely take Gordon over Fitz.
Okay.
Just because I think Fitz is kind of like on his way out. They got a lot of quarterback changes themselves going on. As great as Fitz is, his cliff is just clearly on the way.
Yeah, it's definitely a precipitous drop there when it does happen. Yeah, I mean, it's just something to think about, though. But I mean, hey, if you believe in Josh Gordon, and again, if he comes out and he's, getting the ball thrown to him by Tyrod 50 yards down the field twice a game and, just going up, getting it, and then stiff arming pussies out of the way, that's go ahead and take him. Like, just go for it. He's insanely talented. This is a guy who people, including I think myself, which definitely overreaction, but like people were trying to make the case that he was the most talented wide receiver in the league when Calvin fucking Johnson was in the league, who's arguably the most talented wide receiver ever. So like, that's how talented this guy is. We know he's the ceiling that he can have. So yeah, it's a lot of risk, but if it hits, man, you are sitting real pretty. Let's talk about Landry, who is currently going 8th pick of the 5th round. That's wide receiver 24. I'm scared about his volume. That's as basic as it really needs to be. This is a guy who had 166 targets, then 131, and then 161 over the past 3 years. And he needs that heavy volume to produce because he doesn't really get a ton of yards per catch. He doesn't get a ton of yards per attempt, and he doesn't get a lot of touchdowns. So, I mean, with Tyrod Taylor, with the assumption that Tyrod Taylor will be starting for, say, the first 6-7 games of the season, I don't see how Jarvis Landry could possibly pay off that draft price.
Yeah, and I'm totally with you. I don't think he will at all. It's just it's funny that we're doing the Ravens and Browns together because Jarvis Landry is basically the Joe Flacco of wide receivers. Like he has high volume and he doesn't even go over 1,000 yards with 112 catches. Just like Joe Flacco throws the ball almost 600 times and doesn't get over 4,000 yards. It's just like, how did that happen with that volume? It just doesn't make sense. So I'm definitely going to stay away as much as I love Landry. But like you said, things could change quickly. And then if Baker Mayfield comes in, I think you'd agree with me that Jarvis Landry would almost be more valuable in that offense than Josh Gordon.
Yeah, that isn't to say that Baker can't throw the ball downfield, because he can, but you would think rookie quarterback comes in and Jarvis Landry just kind of provides a very safe target for him, a guy over the middle who, you know, can make the first read and then can sort of get it to him if the first read isn't there, that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I think if Mayfield does come in, that's sort of the time to, you know, be playing Landry. That's when you will want to really use him more. But I don't know. I will not be owning Jarvis Landry unless he falls significantly past that ADP.
Yeah, and there are guys going after him. I'll just read them off like in order as they are now. Chris Hogan, Marvin Jones, Corey Davis, Michael Crabtree, Sammy Watkins, Edelman, Fuller, and Garcon. Like rounds after Jarvis Landry. Stock up on a different position. Elite tight ends possibly hanging around there. Elite quarterbacks if you're into that. So there are other guys to spend that draft capital on rather than Jarvis Landry there in the 5th round.
Yeah, I mean, you stopped a couple names short of him too, but like Jamison Crowder, and you know the guys Don and Shrek will be talking about him in the NFC East podcast. But Jamison Crowder is Alex Smith's slot receiver, and Jarvis Landry is Tyrod Taylor's slot receiver. Like, who would you rather have? And that's Crowder's a full 2.5 rounds later, you know?
Yes.
So, yeah, you're right. There's about 10 guys that are going below that I would probably take over Jarvis Landry, which kind of shows you how we feel about him at this point in time. In terms of the rest of the wide receivers on the team, you have Corey Coleman, obviously, is the biggest name. He was the first wide receiver taken in the draft a couple of years ago. You also have guys like Antonio Callaway, Rashard Higgins, Ricardo Lewis, and Jeff Janis, who have all kind of, outside of Callaway, shown potential at various points, but really aren't probably worth thinking about. Coleman's sort of like John Ross, who we mentioned in our last podcast for me, where I don't think he's the worst dart throw you can make at the end of a draft. He's sort of been plagued by injuries his first 2 years in the league. But, you know, we did say before that they're planning on using Landry in 2 wide receiver sets. So Coleman probably won't be on the field more than 60-70% of the snaps.
Yeah, it's a shame because when he's, you know, healthy and active, he is a good player. So it'd be interesting to see what they do. Like the Browns are such a deep team. They could probably trade him or, you know, just cut him. It's going to be interesting what they do here.
Yeah, definitely. Let's move on to tight end, where we've got David Njoku, who is the second-year wide receiver tight end. Let's move on to tight end, where we have the second-year wide receiver. You stupid moron. Good job, host. So David Njoku, he's going the 12th pick in the 12th round. That's tight end 13. He is a big athletic dude with a lot of potential. They also did sign Darren Fells in the offseason to a 3-year deal. Not that I expect Fells to be a fantasy producer or anything, but to me, that's a little bit of a warning sign that maybe this isn't the breakout year for Njoku, particularly when we're expecting bigger years out of, you know, Gordon, Landry, and even some of the running backs. I don't know. I'm not really targeting him on the roulette wheel.
Yeah, I'm not really about it either. I mean, how many guys can we name that we were expecting to have more of an opportunity and getting more volume than, you know, without David Njoku involved? So there's just too much to go around, too many high-profile players that they brought in. I think he'll be, you know, shit end of the stick there with the opportunities, even though he is a big athletic freak and he will have his games. It's just not going to be anywhere near consistent. So I will also be staying away from that for at least this year.
Yeah, maybe a streamer. Maybe you can catch him lucky touchdown week. Maybe a DFS play some weeks, but not for me in terms of the draft. You got anything else on the Browns?
No, I'm actually just kind of terrified that they're going to be good now, and a lot of things are going to change in the NFL here.
Yeah, if the Browns are good, it's definitely a different NFL landscape than it has been in the past. So let's move away from them and let you guys ruminate over the Browns while we hear from our good friends over at Auction Draft. Are you good or?
Oh yeah.
All right, sweet.
Yeah, let's finish.
All right, guys, we are back. That was Auction Draft, and we are going to finish out the AFC North with the Baltimore Ravens. We'll start over at the quarterback position where we have the old mainstay, Joe Flacco. And then we have the young, exciting rookie, Lamar Jackson, who they traded up to take with the last pick in the first round, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
Flacco not being drafted. Good. Should he be drafted?
No, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's worth noting that last year he was awful, particularly in the first half of the year. He wasn't too bad in the second, but he also missed all of training camp with a back injury last year. And he, as I said, he did play better down the stretch during that playoff push that they sort of had. I still don't think he should be drafted, but I mean, you could convince me to stream Flacco a couple weeks this season.
There have been times where I didn't try to convince you and you did it anyway. So Joe Flacco will probably be played by you at some point, which he's always in the streamer category when a good thing pops up because they did bring a lot of guys in as well. So I didn't mean to underplay Flacco there as a fantasy asset because he probably will reach streamer territory for a lot of people.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not really saying much. Lamar Jackson is fucking intriguing as hell if he gets on the field, though, because he's clearly the best rushing quarterback in this draft class. Got 50 rushing touchdowns in 3 years in college, and he's also a pretty solid passer. He increased his completion percentage every year in college. He's a better passer than people give him credit for, I think. If Flacco gets hurt or gets benched or whatever the case may be, Lamar Jackson is immediately a guy who can come in and maybe not be the best on the field quarterback, but he can be your fantasy quarterback, I think, any day of the week, and particularly on Sundays. That was really bad. What do you think about Lamar Jackson?
Oh, man, it certainly makes me think that there will be a huge quarterback problem like really soon. Like if Flacco starts slow, Lamar Jackson's going to be like all over the media. It's just going to be ridiculous. And Flacco hasn't really done anything since his big contract that's been like eye-popping or amazing. So the Lamar Jackson, even just them taking him is shocking to me. So it's certainly something that looms large over the Ravens organization right now. So there could be a lot of pressure to get him on the field earlier than he's ready. Could it be the Deshaun Watson effect, which I'm seeing a lot of people hoping it will be? I think that was more Deshaun Watson being really freakishly good than willing to like lightning strike twice again with Lamar Jackson. But as you said before, if he sees the field, it's immediately intriguing, and he'll probably be able to contribute. Like we saw Tim Tebow have great games, and he was just god-awful passer and still putting up good games fantasy-wise. So Lamar Jackson certainly has some weapons around him as well. So if he does see the field, our eyes will be popping out of our heads real quick.
Oh, yeah, for sure. If he's named the starter, I am picking him up off every waiver wire I can get him off. All right, let's talk about the running back position. We saw Alex Collins really come into his own last year after being cut by the Seahawks during training camp. He was really integral to that second half surge that we talked about with the Ravens, averaging 19 touches a game from week 8 onward. What do you think about him going fourth pick in the 4th round? That's running back 19. So I mean, you're not paying nothing for Alex Collins. Do you think it's worth it?
I do, because what was the most impressive thing about Alex Collins last year was the Ravens were awful and they ran it so much without, they were just like, we're running it, we're just going to do it. And he was still awesome. Like there was no, they're going to stack the box issue. Like it didn't fucking matter. Alex Collins was great. He's a young back, and they're going to do the same thing again. The only thing that maybe slightly concerns me is Kenneth Dixon coming back from suspension, being healthy, because they did love him a year prior. So that could get a little interesting. And like you said, you're not paying nothing for Alex Collins like you did last year when you just pick him up off the waiver wire. So things could get a little dicey quickly, but I think Alex Collins is pretty solidified in their offense, and I hope they utilize him like they did last year. Otherwise, there could be some issues.
Yeah, I think I've spent most of the offseason sort of like waffling on what I think of him, and I'm starting to think that he's a guy that I'm going to actively target unless we really see, them feature Kenneth Dixon heavily in the preseason. I think there's a lot of reasons to like, but also like some reasons to be cautious about Alex Collins. So on the plus side, he's getting both the starting guards back from injury. Guards are, very important to the run game, particularly a guy running in between the tackles like Alex Collins. That's good. On the downside, his yards per carry sort of went down as the year went on last year. So we saw him wear down a little bit as they gave him more and more work. Can he hold up over a full season, getting 18 or so touches a game? Downside, only 36 targets last year. Wasn't particularly used heavily in the pass game. Upside, over the last 3 games of the year, he had 8, 4, and 6 targets. So it's possible that towards the end of the year, they were like, hey, we can give this guy a shot in these scenarios, and maybe that'll carry over to this year. So there's things on both sides here that you can really think about and that you can really lock into in terms of where you want your opinion to fall. But just based on the other talent going in that area and what I think sort of the potential that Collins has, I think I'm gonna really go after him. Particularly when the next pick is fucking Rashad Penny.
Yeah, I was just about to say, this is that territory that we were like ranting about, I think a couple podcasts ago, where it's just people saying fuck it and taking all the rookie running backs when Alex Collins is still right there. He does start the run of these guys, but if you're able to grab Alex Collins, like after you grab 2 elite wide receivers, like we've been stressing very clearly all draft season, Alex Collins is not like he could be. Say you grab 2 elite guys, you could possibly have Joe Mixon and Alex Collins. That's not bad.
Yeah, it could be worse. You mentioned Dixon and how he is coming back. They did seem to like him a lot. And then he got suspended and hurt and all those good things last year. He's currently the 7th pick in the 13th round. That's running back 56. He's a dart throw, and I think he's a worthy dart throw. What do you think about him there?
Yeah, certainly, especially when it's this late. Obviously, this should change with some preseason stuff. He's very dynamic when he's been out there. So I'm eager to see what he's able to do. But certainly, if it stays this low, very intriguing dart throw.
Yeah, he's one of the few guys, who you can get at that point in the draft, who I think his upside, even almost without an injury, like obviously we like Alex Collins, but he put it together for half a season. And we know how fickle teams are with running backs and who they play and those sorts of things. So I think even without an injury, Kenneth Dixon's upside is a guy who's getting 2/3 of the touches and the majority of the passing down work for a team that will likely, give the ball to the running back a decent amount. So it's hard to really get that kind of upside in those sorts of rounds, which really makes him a guy that I would be also targeting in those late rounds. Buck Allen is also still here. Do we give a fuck?
No.
Yeah, me neither. Let's talk about the wide receivers because they look really, really, really different than last year. Gone are Jeremy Maclin, and why can I not think of a single person? Mike Wallace. Yeah, Jesus. So gone are these guys, and in we have Michael Crabtree, Willie Snead, and John Brown. Rashad Perryman and Chris Moore are also still there on the team, but I think it's relatively safe to assume that the top 3 guys on the team should be Crabtree, Snead, and Brown. Crabtree's the only one getting drafted, so we'll talk about him first. He's the 5th pick in the 6th round. That is wide receiver 28. Do you like him at wide receiver 28?
I just don't like the situation. Like the Ravens seem to do this all the time where they bring a guy on like the tail end of his career, even though he's still good. and just kind of use him incorrectly, or just he's the number one. Yeah, like we always preach that, but what's there to go around when Joe Flacco isn't consistently going over 4,000 yards? That's the kind of thing you look for when you're trying to get a fantasy asset. So Michael Crabtree, obviously a great red zone threat, but we've seen, like, I thought Jeremy Maclin would have a better year than he did last year with the Ravens. Did he have some playable games? Yeah, horribly inconsistent, and just had to rely on a touchdown, and the Ravens weren't exactly raking those in last year, which I don't expect them to this year, even with the added talent. So taking a gamble on Michael Crabtree in the 6th, I'd much rather grab other guys later, kind of like we were saying with I was saying with Smith-Schuster, possibly just grabbing the later guys, hanging around there, grabbing other people in place. I just don't see how, like, the ceiling that Michael Crabtree could have on the offense is not doing it for me.
That's definitely fair, and I don't think the ceiling is particularly high. And you're right, the Ravens do have, sort of a history of misusing guys in this sort of thing. I keep coming back to the idea, though, that, like, unless they're, like, really fucking dumb, or Joe Flacco is, like, the most washed person in the history of the world, like, he's got to get 120 targets and lead the team in red zone targets, or at least lead that wide receiving core in red zone targets. And to me, like, you got to take that guy in the 6th. It's like 120 targets plus probably 15 to 20 red zone targets. Like, I don't know how I can pass that up, but you make good points too. It's really difficult. It's one of those where, like, I'll probably find myself taking Crabtree in certain spots, and I'll do it and just kind of be like,
But it was the Maclin pick last year, dude. It's just like, oh man. And then you just keep telling yourself, like, he's a number one wide receiver on an NFL team. And then he's in your flex, and then he slowly goes to your bench, and you just hate yourself.
Yeah, I know it's easy to retrofit narratives to things. Like, you can retrofit the narrative that Joe Flacco missed camp in preseason last year to, like, be the reason that Maclin didn't pan out, which may or may not be true. But
get the fuck, get out of here.
Just let me be optimistic about Crabtree.
I do love that. Sucks too, because I'm a huge Crabtree fan.
Yeah, you love that guy.
I do. I love Crabtree, and this is probably the worst outcome, because it was when they're, like, potentially getting Dez too. I'm just like, two of my favorite wide receivers are going to come to an arch rival. Why me?
Yeah, an arch rival, and, like, also just, like, a place for wide receivers to die.
Yes, it's the graveyard, dude.
Yeah.
It's rough.
All right, so Crabtree, obviously not our favorite guy, a guy that I might end up with more than advisable, but I think your take is probably better than mine on him, because mine is more just like, he's got to do something. But let's move on to the other guys, namely Willie Snead and John Brown. I think we can ignore Perryman and Chris Moore. Neither of these two guys are being drafted. Do you think there's one of them similar to the John Ross and the Corey Coleman type things, where maybe late round flyer, you would do it? Like, do you think one of these guys can be that guy?
It's hard for me. Like, I think if John Brown is fully healthy, he'll fit right into the Mike Wallace mold, which could be, inconsistent but pretty good for a flex fill-in, especially when it's free, like we always say. And there's a lot of things that fringe on that, though. Like, John Brown's health has never been fantastic, but he's absolutely a great talent. It's just, can he stay on the field? So I'd be wary of that, and he could probably be a guy you could pick up during the season. Same goes for Willie Snead. I think he's going to have to show me, even though he was great last year, he was awful. They did not implement him back after suspension at all. But the 2 years prior, he was fantastic. He was approaching 70 catches and almost getting 1,000 yards and around like 5 touchdowns a season. But that was also with Drew Brees. So I'm going to have to see it in the offense. And he's probably a guy I could pick up in the season too, just like John Brown. So I'll do the wait and show me approach for these guys.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm interested to see who's on the field in two wide receiver sets along with Michael Crabtree, which one of these guys it is. I'm interested to see who's manning the slot in this offense because, that can lead to a lot of easy targets and really, in PPR leagues, give you a guy who's cheap and playable on a week-to-week basis. So I think there's things to look at during preseason. John Brown's definitely the guy that I would lean towards in terms of late round upside because he's a guy who, if he stays healthy, he's going to be on the field for, at least 70% of the snaps, and he's got 4.34 speed. So that's good. We like those things. At the tight end, I don't think there's really much. They still have Max Williams and Nick Boyle. Max Williams was a high draft pick for them a couple of years ago. Hasn't really panned out. And then they drafted Hayden Hurst in the first round, and then also took Mark Andrews, who in this situation is not a skinny Welsh professional wrestler, but instead a tight end out of Oklahoma, I want to say, in the third round.
Exact opposite.
What?
Of each other.
Of the of our beloved skinny Welsh professional wrestler / pop punk singer,
punk rock.
Yeah. If you don't know Mark Andrews the wrestler, just look him up or something. He's fun. But anyway, this isn't him. I guess the expectation is for Hayden Hurst to be the number one tight end. I don't know. None of them are going to be fantasy relevant this year. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, we've been chasing the elusive, illustrious tight end of Joe Flacco for quite some time, you and me, and it just has not panned out in the slightest. So suffered many a heartbreak, but I don't think any of these guys are going to be able to fit the mold.
Yeah, not worth it. Maybe one of them emerges as a primary target later in the season. I don't know who the fuck it'll be. I don't really care at this point because it's not worth drafting them. That'll be it for the Ravens, I think, unless you got anything else, man.
No, that wraps up the AFC North for us. Thanks for hanging out. This was more fun than usual with the shakeup that the Browns brought, man. It's really brings it lively because usually it's a downer on the Browns Ravens cast.
Yeah, no, Browns and Ravens both really kind of shook things up a lot this offseason. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out for both of them. I think a lot of people are optimistic for the Browns, maybe not as much for the Ravens, but we'll see what happens. So yeah, that's the AFC North, guys. Again, I don't know exactly when this is out, but if you haven't listened to our NFC West and NFC
West,
I'm not even drinking beer, dude. I had a coffee while I recorded this, and I'm just talking like an asshole. NFC West or NFC East podcasts, both of those divisions have come out recently or are coming out in the future, depending on when Shrek decides to do things. So yeah, just fucking keep an eye out or something. Keep on mock drafting, as Vinny always says, and we got the Hall of Fame game coming up real fucking soon. So for Vinny, I am Walsh. Later, podcast.